It's another new beginning for Superman hiding behind this iconic Neal Adams cover. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Daryl. I am the host of Read Your Comics, and I'm continuing to look at Superman comics of every era I can get my hands on as I gear up with the excitement for James Gunn's Superman reboot later this summer. And speaking of reboots, I guess this was kind of a new reboot. I mean, it says an amazing new adventure of Superman. They put a big number 1 on it to make you think that this is the start of something. I mean, it's technically Superman number 233, but that number 1 is certainly misleading. So I'm guessing during this time they were trying to do a kind of semi-soft relaunch of Superman, kind of bringing him into a more modern era. This is 1971. By this point, Marvel was dominating the comic sales on the newsstands, and Superman was probably looking a little old-fashioned. Now, what did a soft reboot mean at that time? It's hard to really say as I read this, because my knowledge of the 50s and 60s Superman is kind of more on the peripheral. It's not from a lot of reading of those issues, but reading about the era and those issues. I can't speak to specific points that show this is going in a new direction. But they threw this big number 1 on the cover, so, I guess they were trying to do something, right? Now, this is a book, I've recognized this cover for ages. It's definitely a classic, but I'd never actually read it. Even in a reader copy that's $15-20, that was just more than I really wanted to spend on a Superman book because I've never been a big pre-crisis Superman collector. But this one definitely stands out, and I want to real quick show this comic book artist magazine from 2003 where Neal Adams and Alex Ross teamed up to do this cover. So that should show you just how iconic it is that eventually even Alex Ross had to recreate it with Neal Adams himself. It's interesting to compare the two, really, and you can see the 2003 anatomy and the way that Neal Adams even has changed his style. Look at the shape of his head. I mean, when Alex Ross paints over somebody else's pencils like this, he pretty much preserves the basic construct of it. He just is more or less adding the color to it. This is a really good magazine. Maybe I'll do a whole episode covering it sometime. But before we jump in, I just want to go ahead and point to my Superman playlist there. If you've missed any of my previous episodes, it's going right there. I'm going to do several more before the movie comes out. And, people seem to be enjoying these Superman videos, so I may keep it going a little longer than once the movie comes out. It just depends on how tired I get of the character. Also, if you're new to the channel or just haven't done so already, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Go ahead and drop a like at the end of the video. That helps other comic fans and people that enjoy these top-down, page-by-page flip-throughs find the channel. So let's jump in. I will point out that, DC doing their facsimile on newsprint paper, which is much appreciated. The paper has that little bit of, gray off-white coloring to it that really kind of helps, I think, make the artwork pop off a little bit more than the high gloss stuff that Marvel does. I'm going to criticize Marvel's facsimiles every chance I get. So I was partly disappointed by the insides when I realized it wasn't Neal Adams. It's Curt Swan, who is an all-time classic Superman artist, been doing Superman for years, and that's one of the things I feel like, is this really much of a reboot? Because it's going to keep an artist who's been working on Superman for over a decade on the book. Now, it looks good. Curt Swan does an amazing job on this issue, but the iconic Neal Adams cover, I was kind of hoping for some Neal Adams interiors. We're going to get Curt Swan instead. So Superman breaks loose. And even on the front page, it's saying beginning a return to greatness, an old majesty, and a stunningly new tale of thrills, tragedy, and heroism. So still trying to kind of drive home that this is a new starting point for Superman. And you've got this silhouetted figure looking at these images of I guess, an old school Superman. There's another side to the Man of Steel we're going to learn about. Denny O'Neil is the writer of this, by the way. This is a classic Curt Swan Superman pose, by the way. It's the one arm up with the leg bent. That's something Curt Swan is kind of known for. So, again, all of this is beautiful, I think. So, there's where my disappointment kind of ended. I was hoping for Neal Adams. And then I saw these pages and I'm like, hey, this is just as good. I'm not gonna complain any further than that. All of this looks great. I love the coloring on it. They're maintaining some of that original coloring. It's on newsprint. It looks really good. So Superman is helping this professor with an experiment where he is using green kryptonite to create an energy source that they're saying would supply cheap electricity to undeveloped areas, which pretty noble cause, and using something that is traditionally Superman's biggest vulnerability into something that is beneficial to mankind. So Superman is helping with this despite the dangers to himself. I love this panel here. Something's going wrong, though. It's going out of control. So Superman has to fly in, and he's made this big lead dome to cover up the kryptonite core if he has to. But as he does it, the dome gets thrown back, and it flings Superman back. These are two great panels here, and kind of knocks him out. And he comes to with these guys standing around him, asking if he's okay, and he's like, not seriously, it seems, when he thought for sure that he would be killed by such a blast of kryptonite. And notice it left this shape in the sand right there. It even has his cape a little bit laying on it. So they help Superman up, and then these guys come running up with kryptonite. Now, I want to say, I was reading this with my kids, and they were laughing at all these people like running up to Superman with a chunk of kryptonite. They're like, how do they have so much kryptonite? And if they're Superman's friends, why are they doing this to him? But it was kind of funny to think like, hey, look at this kryptonite, Superman. But it turns out it turned to iron. And in fact, this guy comes running out of another area that was like really far away from the explosion, and all this kryptonite is turned into iron as well. And so Superman says, I wonder if this affected all the green K on Earth. I better go find out. So he takes off, and they keep making sure that you see this indention in the sand as he's flying away. Quick cut. I mean, there's no point in showing Superman checking out everything. We're just going to go to the newspaper, and it's like, kryptonite is destroyed. So that's your Kryptonite No More on the cover. Alien substance reduced to ordinary iron in wake of freak chain reaction. Now he's really invulnerable. And you have the Daily Planet reacting. Jimmy's all happy about it, and he's like, isn't it great, Mr. Kent? And Clark says, as Superman, I'd be jumping for joy, but as Clark Kent, I'll play it cool. It's wonderful, Jimmy. Just a simple little statement. He does have an exclamation mark. And then we meet Morgan Edge. Now, Morgan Edge was actually introduced in the Kirby, Jimmy Olsen's friend, in the Kirby book, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. And he was meant to be a conduit to show how organized crime had infiltrated corporate media. And I guess that was also kind of a commentary on Kirby's part, trying to show that there was some organization that had purchased Warner Brothers and DC Comics at the time that I guess had some ties to organized crime. Now, eventually this character turns out to not be that, but at this time, those books, the Jimmy Olsen books by Kirby, had only been coming out for a couple of months. So at this particular time, Morgan Edge was definitely an agent of Darkseid. And eventually they change it to where this was like a clone of the real Morgan Edge, and it wasn't him. But in this instance, he's here kind of being J. Jonah Jameson in a way, saying he doesn't trust someone with that much power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he doesn't like the fact that Superman is now really has no weakness other than magic, but that's real rare. And you see Jimmy making a face like, I don't like that idea at all. Then he's going to basically, I guess I should say Morgan Edge is also, he's like a big media guy who owned Galaxy Broadcasting, and he had purchased the Daily Planet, and now he's going to like overstep Perry White and make Clark a correspondent journalist. So he gives him this portable camera to go cover this mail rocket. So this is a rocket that's being designed just to shoot mail like across the Atlantic or something. It's kind of silly in itself. But the fact that Clark is just sent with the camera to set up himself, and he's thinking, it's one thing to be a newspaper person. I can slip off and nobody really questions where I went. But if I'm going to be on TV, how am I going to just slip off? And they got to find a creative way around it. So I guess this would kind of be the new the new direction for Superman at the time, that they're kind of getting him out of being just a simple newspaper person, and now he's going to be on a news network, which I think they even say is a 24-hour news network, predating the days of cable news as we know it now. But fortunately, Clark doesn't have to deal with a camera person or crew with him. He's able to just take this little portable camera, set it up himself, and do his report. Really good shot of this person just watching TV. I was slightly confused to thinking this was Morgan Edge himself watching it, but because it says viewers throughout Metropolis. So I think this is just supposed to be some average Joe watching TV and seeing Clark Kent report on the launch of this mail rocket. Now here's where Clark figures out his way around having to be on TV, because there are commercial breaks. So while he is reporting, he sees some shady guy standing behind a brick launch wall, wants to know what's going on. He's able to cut away for a commercial, quickly change into Superman and confront this person who's, I guess, talking on an early cell phone himself of 1971 standards. And he's part of a group that wants to steal this rocket. Not because of there's anything on the rocket necessarily, but they figure they can sell it to a foreign entity who might want to reverse engineer it. Superman, of course, isn't going to let that happen. He doesn't come to attack the guy necessarily. He's just going to confront him, try to scare him into, turning himself in. And this guy thinks he's all prepared with some kryptonite. Superman kind of laughs, says, "You haven't seen a paper or you can't read. Looks good. Mind if I try it? Not bad. A trifle stale, and it could use a bit of salt." Great facial expressions by Swan here. I think, again, I can't really compliment Curt Swan enough in these issues. I can't really compliment Curt Swan enough in this issue. I can see why he was the definitive Superman artist for so long. So the guy's in complete shock, and Superman's able to just give him a little flip, a little tap, and it knocks him out. And then those commercials are almost over, so he's got to change back into Clark and get back in front of his TV camera for the launch. And I was looking at this and the smoke coming around his leg. I thought, man, he's awfully close to this rocket taking off. Might give away that he's Superman there from just being invulnerable. But the more I look at it, I'm thinking the rocket itself was kind of small. It wasn't like some gigantic rocket. And I don't think it was really meant to go into space and come back down. It's just more or less like a intercontinental ballistic, but instead of delivering an explosive payload, it's going to deliver packages. I wonder if Jeff Bezos read this when he was a kid. So the smoke, though, once again is able to give him cover to turn into Superman once more, because that guy tipped it off that these planes were going to come to hijack the rocket, and he's able to stop it. And just solid action. One of the plane has some guns, shoots at Superman. He tries to use his heat vision, though, on the engine, and his heat vision isn't working quite that well, which he finds odd. So he's going to have to just go in and manually take it out. I like the tilted angles of the panels here. It's actually split in two, right? You've got a nice straight horizontal line here, but this diagonal here and diagonal here to really kind of lead your eye across the page. Works really well. Superman comes into the cabin and just bonks their heads, and then he puts it on autopilot. That's kind of the thing too, is in these older comics. I mean, Marvel was guilty of this stuff too. You want to give them some kind of heroic action like that, but now it's is the plane going to fall out of the sky? No, we're just going to say there's an autopilot that can also land the plane. But we've got a second plane going on here, so Superman's going to go take it out. And he says, it gets kind of boring doing the same trick over and over again. So instead of ripping a hole in the back and going in the plane, I'm just going to use my X-ray vision and punch right through and bonk them both on the head. Thud, thud. And then he's using his telescopic vision to see that the rocket is safely out of harm's way. And he's just going to tow this plane in. I guess he knocked those guys out, and since he wasn't on the inside of the plane, he couldn't put it on its auto landing sequence, so he's just going to tow it in himself. But he's wondering why his his heat vision didn't work in that instance, and he realizes that they're kind of over the area where there was the kryptonite explosion at the beginning of the issue, and that maybe there's some residual K radiation in the air, and it's something he's going to have to try to investigate a little bit more. And we see that place where he landed as they drift over it. We wrap up with Morgan Edge essentially saying, like, Kent, you did such a good job. I'm making you the permanent correspondent now. Perry kind of protests, like, I need him here. And Edge is kind of usurps him. Wow, he looks a lot different here. Face looks a lot different from earlier in the book. In the beginning, it's almost like he was drawing him more like Kirby does. And here he's changed. So then we get an epilogue, and we see this Superman-looking figure kind of coming up out of the sand. And so this is the Sandman. And this is a story that I guess is going to carry on for about 4 or 5 issues even. It's a subplot that keeps running with this Sandman that has Superman's powers that he got from this whole explosion here. I've done a video on a Superman special that Walt Simonson kind of retells this story. And it's interesting for me to read this now because I hadn't read it before versus what I've read in that Walt Simonson story in the past. So kind of neat. If you want to watch that video, I'll put it right there. Unfortunately, because this is a facsimile, I'm only going to get this part. I believe it is collected in some trade paperbacks. So I would like to see how the story develops some more. I doubt I'll track down the original issues. So that's pretty much the end of the Superman story itself. You get this kind of cartoony Superman, Super Turtle story, which is kind of awkwardly placed in here. Superman mailbag, or Metropolis mailbag. Not seeing any famous names in there. And then the second half of the book is a Jor-El story. So you're getting this fabulous world of Krypton. And this is kind of fun to compare with the World of Krypton book that John Byrne and Mike Mignola did. I've got a video on it. You can see it right there. But this pre-crisis world is a lot more colorful, I would say, than what John Byrne did in the 80s. But this is an interesting story. We got Murphy Anderson does the art in this. Now, Anderson was the inker with Curt Swan in the first story, and he also is kind of known as the Curt Swan inker. So the other thing that Murphy Anderson was kind of known for was being asked to redraw the faces on Superman in the Kirby books. Just a little side note there. Anyway, I think he does a good job as the main illustrator on this as well. But this is kind of a story of Jor-El. I would say he was like coming out of college, you would say. And the way the Kryptonians soak in knowledge is they would wear these things on their heads that basically is just downloading knowledge into their brains. And then they would have to do these scanners that would kind of project what their best skill set was for going forward. And he's saying that he had a best friend and hoped that they would get to go do something together, but they don't. He's actually going to go work on a space program for Krypton where he's going to meet Professor Ken Dahl and General Drew Zod. He's also going to see that the women are actually astronauts on Krypton, and this is where he gets his first glance at Laura Lor-Van, who would, of course, become his wife, the mother of baby Kal-El. Jor-El is working on a ship here. He makes a levitation belt. I don't know if this is supposed to be Krypto or just some random Krypton dog. He makes a levitation belt, which the military of Zod and everybody is pretty interested in. Other notes in this is there's a lot of talk about funding for this space program on Krypton, that it was over budget and stuff. A lot of earthly problems on this Krypton. But he's going to build this lightweight ship, and he's making it out of this material, gold, and they act as if gold is not a precious resource on Krypton, that it's kind of like they almost make it sound like it's aluminum or something. But he's going to make it out of gold, and they're kind of laughing at him because they're like, that'll never hold up for space travel, but he's going to use his levitation device anyway that's supposed to like keep the integrity of it up. And they're calling it Jor-El's Golden Folly. And Laura is very interested in what Jor-El is doing, and you can see that they are forming a quick connection here. So in the test launch, which was supposed to be unmanned, but Laura snuck onto the ship to check it out, and she ends up having to take controls, and they were going to one of the moons. Was part of the project anyway, and there was already a rocket going there, but this one was a test flight. That's the part that didn't really make sense. It's like, well, they already had a rocket that they were sending there with a crew. Why are they testing this one with Jor-El so closely? Because Laura goes and kind of gets stranded on this moon. So Jor-El is going to stow away on this rocket, and he uses his levitation belt where he levitates inside the rocket as not to add his weight to the rocket itself. So kind of clever. I like the Kryptonian space outfits here as he goes on this moon and is hopping around, and he finds Laura, and where he rescues her, they, I guess, fall in love, and that's the beginning of Superman. So I don't know if the next issue continues on with these World of Krypton stories. Kind of neat, I don't know. As a kid, would you be disappointed that the Superman story was only half the issue and then you get these, or would you be like, oh, cool, I get 2 stories out of this? And then this is a new year brings a new beginning for Superman. This is kind of giving you an update on what's going on with the new status quo for Superman. And here's Jimmy Olsen and the Newsboy Legion, written and drawn by Jack Kirby. You've got Rose and Thorn, a new feature appearing in Lois Lane, Supergirl in the Adventure Comics, and Superman teams up with Flash, Green Lantern, and other heroes in World's Finest. So I guess there's always a Superman team-up book of some sort going on. World's Finest I always think of as just Superman and Batman, but it must have been Team Up with Anybody book for a while, and then eventually DC Comics Presents comes out, and it's the team-up book, and World's Finest was still going on for a little while. Anyway, this is a pretty fun issue. I would like to read the rest of the story. I'll have to probably track it down in trade paperbacks. It's fun to look at it and compare it to what Walt Simonson did in his one little special that did the whole story in one book. Overall, I really enjoyed the Curt Swan art in this, probably most out of anything. Well, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, read your comics. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my breakdown of this issue, you can support the channel by hitting subscribe. It costs you nothing and helps other comic fans find the channel. You can also visit readyourcomics.com for cool merch, like this. Read Your Comics isn't just a brand, it's a mantra. And when you wear a Read Your Comics shirt, you are helping spread the word. For more classic comics conversation, be sure to follow me on Instagram at read.your.comics. And if you're still here, why not watch one of my older videos? Here or here.